I'm Courtney Smith.
And I'm Elise Sharp.
And we are two Shakespeare nerds who decided to make a podcast about our love for Shakespeare.
In this podcast, we will tackle as many dimensions to Shakespeare's plays as we can by looking at the text, examining the historical context in which it was written, and how the text is viewed through modern lenses of feminism, racism, classism, colonialism, nationalism, ableism, all of the isms.
We will discuss how his plays shaped both the past and present, and, as actors, how his plays can be responsibly performed today.
All while trying our best to approach his works without giving in to bardolatry. So, Shakespeare, anyone? Hi, listeners. Elise here to remind you of all the ways you can support the podcast and the work that Courtney and I do. First up, we have a Patreon. Our Patreon patrons receive exclusive bonus content. Every month, we do a roundup of Shakespeare-related content we have found online. We also share Patreon-exclusive bonus episodes of the podcast. These look like extended versions of episodes you've heard here, collaborations with other Shakespeare podcasters, and Courtney and I doing reviews of Shakespeare-adjacent media, like TV shows, movies, and books that are inspired by or loosely based on Shakespeare and Shakespeare plays. Patreon patrons also receive snail mail from the podcast, and some levels even vote on future episodes of our podcast. If you are interested in checking out our Patreon, or just the Shakespeare-related names we've given the tiers of support, head to patreon.com/ShakespeareAnyone. The link is also in our episode description. After you've done that, please rate, review, and follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Your review might even make it on an episode. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and tell a friend. Word of mouth is our best form of advertising. Thank you so much for all of the support you give the podcast. Now, on to the episode.
Hi, Elise.
Hi, Courtney.
How are you today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm also doing very well.
I'm very excited for our episode today.
Same.
As our Patreon patrons know, you recently went to England.
I did.
And had some amazing experiences, which have led to you connecting us with our guest today.
Yeah. So I was in England because right now I'm in a master's program for Shakespeare Studies and took a Shakespeare and pedagogy module. And part of that module was going to England, going to Stratford for about a week and learning through the Shakespeare Institute and in tandem with the Royal Shakespeare Company. And while I was there, I was lucky enough to hear a lecture by Kelly Hunter, who was talking about her experience as a theater practitioner and specifically her work with the Flute Theatre. And as soon as we took our 15-minute coffee break, I got on my phone and texted you, Elise, and was like, we need to have her on the podcast. What do you think?
And I said yes.
Yes. And luckily, Kelly said yes to us.
Yes. Before we introduce Kelly officially, I do want to say if anybody wants to hear more about what you did in England and your experiences going to Stratford-upon-Avon and the Globe, they can join our Patreon as one of our paid Patreon members to hear an exclusive little bonus episode where I ask you to tell me all about your trip.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's talk about Kelly.
Yes. Kelly began working in theater aged 17, playing the Mistress in Evita in the West End in 1980. Since then, she has been creatively engaged in theaters, performing and adapting and directing Shakespeare. Kelly has also taught and directed students across the world. Kelly is the author of Cracking Shakespeare, which serves to demystify the process of speaking Shakespeare's language, offering hands-on techniques for drama students, young actors, and directors who are intimidated by rehearsing, performing, and directing Shakespeare's plays, as well as Shakespeare's Heartbeat, drama games for children with autism. Kelly developed the Hunter Heartbeat Method, a series of sensory drama games which allow autistic individuals to share how it feels to be alive and celebrate their identity. Autistic individuals have created this award-winning methodology across the world, working with Kelly over the last 20 years.
Kelly is also the artistic director of the Flute Theatre, which produces award-winning productions of Shakespeare and runs long-term community projects for people marginalized by autism. The Flute Theatre is renowned for their innovative productions of Shakespeare, including specialized shows for autistic individuals, refugees, and those displaced by war. These productions use the award-winning Hunter Heartbeat method. The Flute Theatre performs internationally, adapting the language of their performances to the needs and ears of their audience. They also perform in the UK and internationally with refugees and those displaced by war. And now, please enjoy our conversation with Kelly Hunter. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Elise.
How are you today?
Very well. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, Kelly. We're so glad you're here today.
Very happy to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get to meet you. Courtney attended your lecture and immediately, I think, texted me that we needed to try to get you on. So very excited to chat with you today. The first question, which we ask all of our guests, is what was your first experience with Shakespeare?
Well, I have a very clear memory of my first adult experience with Shakespeare. But I think, and I will tell you that, but a bit like Beatles songs, Shakespeare's plays seemed to be in my consciousness, and I have no idea how they got in there. I just know that they were there. Obviously, somehow I had picked them up from listening to people or school or something. But I know that I understood that there were these plays by this man a long time ago. And I don't quite know where and when those events actually took place, landing in my brain. But having said that, I started my career as an actor when I was very young. When I was about 17, I was in musicals in the West End. I was in the original production of Evita and played Sally Bowles in the West End during the 1980s. But I really didn't want to be in musicals. I could sing and dance quite precociously, but I didn't really enjoy it. I wanted to be a serious actress and do Shakespeare. It was so far away from my own life experience. Although, as I said, I sort of knew the plays existed. Anyway, I stopped being in musicals in my late 20s, and I worked very hard to get myself into the Royal Shakespeare Company and to start playing those parts. And I, on the advice of a very good friend, I went up to Stratford and asked at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust if I could look at the first folio. I was about to play Rosalind for English Touring Theatre, and you can sort of hire out the first folio in their library. This was a long time ago, so before it was easy just to buy a copy. And obviously it's not the only one, it's the printed up copy of the first folio, but I'd never seen it before. So I sat in that library on a sunny afternoon. The sun was coming through the windows, and I opened those big pages of the first folio, and it was the first time I'd seen Shakespeare written down without any notes, without a sort of adaptation and sort of little stars and stripes and sort of this means this and this means that. It just, whoom, there it was on the page. It became blindingly clear to me that this is a body of work. This isn't just one play that I was going to play a part in. I was part of a huge process of poetry. And as I looked at As You Like It, I was also flicking forward and back into other plays and seeing connections everywhere, seeing these connections, this loving eye, the seeing mind, the heartbeat rhythms just flowing through these pages, and it made me cry. I'll never forget it. I just sat in the library with the sun kind of pouring down and just felt like I was privileged enough to be looking at something that was so mysterious that I don't think anybody really understands, even though everyone studies it every day, or lots of people do. So yeah, that was my first experience, and that has kept me alive, or kept my creativity alive for nigh on 30 years. This idea of Shakespeare being so much bigger than me, so transcendental, so sublime, so different from anything else, and so original as well, that I've been inspired by those poetic dramas ever since.
That's beautiful. And I'm crying a little bit just hearing you describe that experience with the first folio, because it in itself seems so poetic and so beautiful of a moment, the way that you describe it.
Can I just say also what's so amazing, if you don't know as you're listening about the first folio, is it was put together by actors who'd been in Shakespeare's plays after Shakespeare had died.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the plays didn't even exist on or sort of as published works. And I think it took at least 8 years. I think he died in 1616. God, I hope I got that right. And then the first folio was published in 1623. So 8 years later comes this whacking great book put together by the scribes and the compositors, but really, to me, put together by the actors who'd spoken those words alive on stage.
Mm-hmm. It's such a labor of love when you see what these people came together to remember their friend by. Like you said, not all the plays were published, and to just make sure that something carried forward is... We're going to get off the topic, and I'm just going to cry about the first folio. But we are here to talk about you. You founded the Flute Theatre in 2014. What type of theatrical work does the Flute do?
So we make productions of Shakespeare, and we've ended up making two very, very different, but in the same way connected ways of working with Shakespeare. Both ways are directed and adapted by me. The first, main stage adaptations of Shakespeare's plays. They're pretty stripped down, they're stripped back. They're for only maybe 7 or 8 actors. I tend to focus on what I want from the play rather than what I want to cut out of the play. A lot of people, when they make a shorter adaptation of Shakespeare, just sit there and go, well, what shall I cut? But rather, I'll only do a play if I know why I want to do it and what I want to have on stage. So, for instance, my production of Hamlet, I worked for a long time before we put it on stage. Just with one actor, and we just looked at the soliloquies. And first we thought we would just be one man speaking those soliloquies, just the idea of the decline of one person's mental health and the inability of everyone else around that person to help them. So yeah, that then became my production of Hamlet then, which we added a few other characters into. So that was the first show we did, main stage show, and we've ended up taking them to big European Shakespeare festivals. And it is such a blessed relief to get out of the UK, where Shakespeare is really shackled by the fact that Shakespeare himself was English, and therefore the main houses, the RSC and the Globe, tend to use Shakespeare as a tourist industry and have to do something for tourists. And it becomes less a work of art and less something cut from the heart and soul of a director, and more something that was got a big fat star in it and will bring as many people into the theatre as possible. So I've ended up going to these rather wonderful Eastern European theatre festivals. I'm off to another one this month, the Craiova Shakespeare International Festival in Romania. So that's with my main stage production. So I've made Hamlet, Twelfth Night, Pericles. I've made another Hamlet. I've gone back to Hamlet in these very dark days of war. I've made a Hamlet called Hamlet Collateral Damage, which is just 2 actors playing Hamlet and Ophelia, where he gets her to play all the parts and sort of traps her in his mind and his room, and then she crumbles in front of him, collapses in front of him. So that's the really creative side of it that way, is these main stage adaptations of Shakespeare that I want to express something about the world we live in now. And so I use Shakespeare's plays and adapt them. And then the other strand of work, which is just as big, is I've created a way of using Shakespeare for autistic individuals. And that focuses on using the rhythm of the heartbeat, which is the first sound you hear in the womb before you're born. It's also the iambic pentameter, which Shakespeare bases all his verse and prose, in fact, on. That sound, that rhythmic heartbeat sound, is arguably the most comforting and warm sound you can hear, reminding you of your pre-birth days. And I've created this whole way, which has been called the Hunter Heartbeat method, of using games of heartbeat with profoundly locked away autistic people. And we use the rhythm of the heartbeat to alleviate their anxieties. We also explore in that sensory games of eye contact and speech and language, proprioception, the vestibular system, all these things that sound very fancy but are actually just a means of waking up the body and the spirit, and allowing you to share whoever you are at that moment with others. And with that, I have a production of The Tempest, Midsummer Night's Dream, Pericles and Twelfth Night, these fully realised productions, just for the autistic community. Only 15 people on the autism spectrum come to each performance. So 8 or 9 actors are sitting on the floor around a painted floor cloth, and we welcome up to 15 autistic individuals who participate in the productions. And I've done them around the world. So when I go to one of these festivals, we also do these shows for the autistic community in Romania or Serbia or Bulgaria or wherever it is we are visiting. And we do those performances in the language that the participants speak and recognise. So we, the English actors, learn the show in Romanian, Serbian, Hungarian, etc.
Incredible. I would love to hear more about the Hunter Heartbeat method that you've developed and what that is. And there's been longitudinal studies on this method you've created. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
What does the Hunter Heartbeat method look like? You've mentioned these sensory games. And then what have these studies shown?
Yeah, the Hunter Heartbeat method was so called by scientists at the Ohio State University because they needed something to call my collection of sensory games. I didn't have a name for it. And it's only with hindsight I think, oh gosh, you actually used my name in there. So it sounds like I sort of named it after myself. They named it after me. With a kind of classic British self-deprecation, I'm sort of saying I didn't do that myself. Anyway, I have developed a way of using Shakespeare to make a theatre experience accessible for people who would otherwise have no opportunity whatsoever to even walk into a theatre, let alone take part in experiencing a Shakespeare play. These are not relaxed performances, which are in themselves very good, very, very worthwhile. This is a specialised way of using Shakespeare. So it's worth kind of knowing where it came from. About 24 years ago, I had been an actor at the Royal Shakespeare Company and was becoming increasingly frustrated with my role as an actor on a big stage. I was very fortunate to have these opportunities, but it didn't really feel like I was doing something deeply creative for myself. So I took myself off to a special school here in London and I offered my services there. We had a tiny bit of funding. I said I can come once a week and create games of Shakespeare for people with no access to the arts. And the teacher said, oh, that's great. Please come. You can play with anybody in the school. But he pointed behind a door and he said, but you can't go behind there because that's where the autistic people are and they would never be able to play with you. And it was just a throwaway comment. He was not a bad person. He was not in any way unkind about the autistic community there, but he just didn't imagine for a second that they would either enjoy it or be able to access whatever it was I was doing. So I was intrigued and wanted to get behind the door. I'd never met anybody with autism, but I wanted to see what possibly could be behind the door that wouldn't be able to engage in some way with drama. I mean, autism is not another species, or an autistic person is a human being just as anybody else is, with an exaggerated complication when it comes to communication. And I went behind the door and I spent the next 3 years of my life, once a week, I never missed a week, with that group of autistic people. There was 12 of them. They were about 13, 14 years old when we started. They're in their late 30s now. I still keep in touch with some of them. And we sat in circles and started by just making the rhythm of a heartbeat, because as I said, I was intrigued by the power of the iambic. I'd known that since I was an actor on stage. And I wanted to pass that on as a means of communication. There were 2 boys in that group who were non-verbal, both called Matthew. And one of the Matthews, after about 6 months, so we would sit in the circle saying, hello, hello, just making these heartbeat hellos. And this Matthew, one day, just having never spoken, just piped up and went, hello, as if he was calling to somebody from over the other side of the road, or even more than that, sort of on another planet. Just this, whoa, this voice from somewhere came from him. It was very clear he never heard the sound of his own voice before. It was amazing. And his teachers were suitably amazed. His parents weren't there, obviously, so it was just in school time. So clearly, having given that person the time and space to practice and to get slightly more in tune with his own inner rhythm, he'd gained the confidence to speak out. This methodology is not simply about getting people to speak. It doesn't matter to me whether people speak or not. It's simply that's someone's choice, or they can or they can't. It really doesn't matter. But what I have experienced over the last 20 odd years across the world is that once autistic people form the habit of playing these games, the sky's the limit where progress in communication is concerned, and just feeling relaxed and a raise in self-esteem and feeling like they're part of a community and a family. There's a whole series of sensory games engaged in eye contact. So within Shakespeare, there are 4 key words that are repeated more than any other words in the canon. And those words are eyes, mind, reason, and love. I'll say them again. Eyes, mind, reason, and love. I know that from a very brilliant book by Louis Zukowski, who's a beat poet in the 60s, who wrote a book called Bottom on Shakespeare. And in it, he says these words are the most repeated words. And it's as if Shakespeare is exploring, as I said earlier, how an eye loves and how a mind sees. The very struggles that someone with autism is having with actually communicating. Their communication skills where it comes to eye contact or being seen or expressing through the eyes and the mind their own reason and love seem to be very curtailed. But I was able to make these different games, which are good fun to play, very short, and fundamentally important, repeatable. So you play a game once, it's under a minute long, and you play it again, and you play it again, and you play it again. So it could be a moment from Midsummer Night's Dream when Titania and Bottom see each other for the first time, and Titania's eyes have been tricked. And in our game, she goes, and her eyes kind of come out on stalks, and that's jolly. It's like a cartoon. And he goes, and she goes, I love you. And then she needs to find his eyes again. And so she moves around the space trying to find his eyes. And when she finds them, boop, and off we go. I've done that for so many years in my life, all over the world. When Miranda and Ferdinand first meet in The Tempest, Prospero says at the first sight they have changed eyes. So in that one, they both go, and he says, oh, you wonder. And she goes, oh, sighs, and then moves away. So these games of finding each other's eyes for 1 or 2 seconds that are played in a way that are fun, genuinely silly. So there's the good, serious silliness, and that the autistic people enjoy and feel that they can do. And then what seems to happen if somebody on the spectrum plays that for a long time, eye contact itself doesn't seem like such a struggle because it's been played with in this sort of rather therapeutic way. But I haven't created a therapy, I've created a theatre practice, and it's really important to me to always say that. It's not transactional. Someone hasn't paid and said, I've got a problem with this, can you mend it? And then we work towards that at all. It's much looser than that. It's much more about us creating these different sensory games inside the narrative of the plays and letting people just come in to moments where they really enjoy it. Like being at more like being at a fairground rather, and you go, oh, I like that ride, I'll go on that one. We have a whole series of games where we tip with a trust game. The autistic participants, one by one, forwards and backwards. The vestibular and proprioceptive systems of autistic people are mainly out of sync. Some people describe the floor as being like a boat in a heavy sea, like a little bit like feeling seasick all the time, like you never feel like you're just on safe ground. So we've developed this way in moments of Shakespeare's plays. So when the clowns are trying to find each other, Stefano and Trinculo in The Tempest, and they're a little bit drunk, kind of going backwards and forwards. And so we tip them further than they would normally go, and singing songs as well. And that's something that has surprised me, how much that is enjoyed by autistic people. So it's an interactive experience, this Hunter Heartbeat method. It happens because autistic people come to theatres, they play with us, and they create these games with us. And, crucially, it's been created by the autistic community. I've played with autistic people for the last 20 years. I haven't done it when there isn't anyone with autism in the room. I just do it with people. And I've learned how to do it better, or different versions of it, over the years through the reactions that the autistic people have had. Either if they're verbal, they'll tell us or tell me what they like or what they don't like, but more especially with non-verbal people. and just the language of pure pleasure that somebody is getting from one of these games. And actually, therefore, I know, okay, we'll just keep doing it. So you're reading the body and the mind of somebody rather than waiting for spoken word.
I really love that you created this in community with autistic people and by autistic people, because I think so often that is a community where people in the past have created things for them,
Yeah.
that you've used their feedback to develop and hone what you do is incredible, just as you would with a neurotypical audience, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And coming off of the Hunter Heartbeat method, you have mentioned that you adapt Shakespeare for autistic individuals. Could you describe your methods for that and what the process is like? You've talked about the shows being seated in a circle with groups of 15. Tell us just a little bit more about that process where you start with the play and how you get to the version that you do with the autistic individuals.
Yeah. So the process really hasn't changed for all these years. When I first went into that room behind the door, as I described, I sat round a circle with 12 autistic individuals and a few actors. And that worked. That felt very, very comfortable. And I've kept to that. You know, if it's not broken, don't mend it. So I haven't changed that. There's always that circle, which is democratically shared. If parents or carers or observers want to join us in the circle, they're so welcome, or sometimes they'll sit just on the outside on an outer circle. So this has all grown very organically from what I began as an instinctive theatre practice. I never set out to make anything other than the play games and share Shakespeare in a way that was not sort of what Peter Brook calls the dead space, you know, with the fourth wall down and just not happening. So I know Shakespeare's plays very, very well. So in answer to what the process is, I wouldn't tackle a play and try and adapt it for the autistic community unless I really know it backwards. And I know which bits are going to leap off the page and be a really wonderful, enjoyable, pleasurable moment to explore and make into one of our sensory games. And those moments, it's the same thing. Where are the moments when two people find each other for the first time? And Shakespeare explores the poetry of the eye contact, because he does it in every play. There's a real pattern there in Shakespeare. You know, his narratives were not original. He stole all his narratives, apart, I think people say, from A Midsummer Night's Dream. But other narratives, their source material is in Boccaccio, Ovid, Plutarch, the histories. And you get a feeling that his originality was, how do I find another way of expressing what it feels like to look at someone for the first time and then look away again. So these moments of eye contact, they can't be understated. They're absolutely huge. And in each of the productions and of Shakespeare for autistic people, there are games, sensory games of eye contact. Sensory games as well of where people get too close to each other and need to move away again. So it's much more relational. It's much more about what's it like to be with another person, and they affect you and you affect them. And that goes right to the heart of what can be the autistic struggle, is just having the ability to understand someone else's expression and be able to make the appropriate expression yourself. It sounds quite basic, but it's also very subtle. But I'm always looking for those moments in Shakespeare's plays, the really core, raw, R-A-W, raw moments of human connection that Shakespeare writes so uniquely, and put them in the middle of the plays.
And I love that too, the eye contact stuff, because I've worked for extended periods of time with autistic individuals in classroom settings. And there is this kind of clinical way of attempting to get these autistic individuals who don't push into mainstream classrooms. They're there all day. There seems like in a lot of the situations I've been in, there's this clinical way of trying to get them to make eye contact and say, hello, good morning. And the playfulness of your method really syncs up with the fact that so many of the kids that I've worked with are playful.
Yeah.
And one autistic individual I was teaching, he loved singing and dancing. He had favorite songs, and so he'd stand up and start singing and dancing them. And so it's just very beautiful, like coming from a classroom, to hear of this method when that seems to be what's not practiced in a lot of the experience I have.
Yeah, that's so key. It seems that if someone's development is slower than would be expected or so-called normal, the world gives up on that development and expects it to just have happened. And if it hasn't happened, then the world goes into this pushing mode of what can we do just to push them just to achieve it? And that's so unkind, basically, what you've just described. It's just unkind. Everyone develops it in different speeds. And also, not everybody, of course, is so obvious, so bleeding obvious. Not everyone is the same. And I don't respond. I don't know anyone who responds well to just being asked a direct question about my very sensitive feelings. I'm not going to answer that. Someone just boldly sort of just wants to know all about me straight away and makes me feel like I'm not doing something right. That's the thing about what you've just described is actually someone would just feel, oh God, I can't make eye contact, it hurts and it's embarrassing and all these things, and they're wanting me to do it. That's just going to have the effect of making the person do it even less. And I'm using me. I'm not using anybody else. I mean, it's a human condition. And some days I don't want to have a look at anyone or anyone to see me. That's just, who doesn't feel that sometimes? That's just humanity. For me, all these things are exaggerated expression of what it feels like to be alive anyway. And yeah, you're so right. In those classroom settings, there are these things that people are meant to be doing and a rather kind of brutal way of trying to achieve it. And then, here's the thing, then it feels like failure if you haven't done it. So then you set up success and failure in something as subtle and loving as eye contact, which is, and so then of course the person closes down. But actually with us, if you want to play the game, great. But lots of people play the game. I'll show you. Literally, quite a few people that I know who wear big scarf over their head and then just have a look like this, because that's how they are. And that's fine. If someone puts a scarf over their head and plays the game with me through the scarf, fine, I don't mind. It doesn't worry me. And so what I've really discovered is if you have that attitude, then the scarf will come off the next time, because I've respected the person in the moment that they were at that point. To me, these things are just blindingly obvious. And I suppose that's a theatre practice and not a classroom practice. This is not an educational thing, although obviously I work with a lot of young people, so it's been picked up as educational because the young people are being educated. But it doesn't reach any targets. It's all about spirit.
And that is one challenging thing about education, is measuring quote unquote success, measuring progress, and trying to like quantify
ticking boxes.
Yeah, ticking boxes. And it's like, that's not how people are. That's not how people learn. So there's this push and pull in these classroom settings. Yeah.
And I think you mentioned, maybe it's the theatrical process. And I think because in theater, the process is what the goal is. We do get an end result with an audience, but it is just as important is that rehearsal process, and things can continue to grow and shift subtly throughout performance. And there's not this box that you're trying to check or this rigid evaluation that you're trying to get someone to achieve. It's whatever we're able to do in the time we have together, that's what we're able to achieve and accomplish together. And that's the show we're going to have. And we're just going to meet people where they're at. It's really clear to me that it's the theatrical process of progress, not trying to achieve an end goal.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Because then if you look at it, if you do it the other way, the achievement is only about the teachers and the school and what we call the league tables over here in the UK. Or if even in the theatre, it's about just the actual building and the institution of the theatre and not the people involved, because you're just wanting to achieve something that you've set up as a target. So my theatre, Flute Theatre, doesn't do that. Consequently, it's a challenge because we don't operate in the more traditional ways. If a lot of the shows that we're doing are only for 15 people and we're paying 8 actors, we are heavily subsidized. We're not going to make a lot of money. And most of the time, I absolutely insist that those families, well, if they can't pay, they don't have to. And then they just give a small donation towards coming, because anyway, there's such a crisis with theatre tickets and prices. It's off the chart all over the world. This doesn't make any sense to me. So it's different in that way. And I really like it. It's very, very refreshing, to be honest, to have managed to do this. And I've run it for 10 years. And during COVID, it really helped us. We continued during COVID. We worked every day. We adapted quickly what I've created to work online. And we did it for one autistic person on a Zoom call. We made these beautiful shows. We had 7 or 8 actors from the UK and Spain, all in their boxes with kind of beautiful velvet block colours and fairy lights. So it was the least technical thing you could imagine. And everyone was rather like a Pina Bausch thing. People were making similar movements and making really nice patterns. And one autistic person would come and we would do an adapted Pericles and Tempest. And we did that lovely thing where you just lean in and go, hi, Courtney. And like, we knew your name.
Mm-hmm.
And they came back again and again. And many, many kids and adults who came found their voices. That was so interesting because they were getting that attention. For some people, just being at home and not having to deal with going out and dealing with the bus and everything that happens when you go out, the comfort of being at home helped as well. So it was really interesting. We ended up doing 950 online adapted performances over that period of time, and it taught me a lot. It re-taught me about what's needed or what you can actually achieve. And while many theatres were kvetching about what they didn't have, we just tried to work out what we still did have and what we could do. Mm-hmm. Financially, I'd never have made that decision just to do it for one person at a time if I hadn't already created a way of using theatre that was only for 15 people. So it just made sense to go, okay, we'll be even bolder now and do it for one person. So we used to do it 5 times a day because the show was kind of an hour.
That's incredible. As someone who works with a theater that also adapted to online performances to serve the community, it was a time commitment, but it was so important to continue to allow people to connect, because that's what the theater that I work with also saw it as. I want to talk a little bit about your upcoming production in Romania. You'll be doing a Midsummer Night's Dream and a Midsummer Nights for Autistic Individuals.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more about this double dream production that you'll be doing in Romania?
Yeah. The dream for autistic people has already been created. We made that a long time ago, back in 2017, I think. The dream games were some of the games I first played. I was saying earlier about Titania and Bottom, and when I was first in that original school all those years ago, the Dream and the Tempest were the 2 plays that I really concentrated on for those 3 years. So we already have that production, which we have performed a lot. We've performed it in the UK and the US and Romania and Poland and various different places already over the last 5 or 6 years. What's funny to most people is that I'm now making a main stage dream. What most people do is they make a main stage production and then they do a kind of educational outreach thing on the other end of it. But I have tended to do the opposite. So we've already got the dream, the basis of that. And now I've been invited back to this great festival in Craiova, which is in the south of Romania. And I've already done there Hamlet, Pericles, Tempest, and Twelfth Night. So I thought it would be good to do a dream, because then we can also bring our autistic dream. So in this festival, as I said, we've been going there for a long time. In the last couple of years, I've persuaded this festival, and it's a very prestigious Shakespeare festival. I've persuaded them to open their doors to the autistic community. So now we do our main stage production, and then we have a little break of about 20 minutes, and then the local autistic people, who we've now made good contacts with and are sort of our Romanian flute family, will come into the theatre, which makes me really happy. I'm obsessed with main stage, big public buildings opening their doors to this community of people. It means so much to them. They never would be invited to go to the theatre, let alone take part in a performance. And it's so fantastic. Literally, they just feel like kings. They just turn up and they get dressed up for it and get a taxi there and perform on the festival stage with us. We learn it in Romanian, and it means the world. So I feel privileged that I've been able to know the festival for long enough that they would listen to me and that they took this leap of faith. And so that's now something that's regular for that festival. And with the dream, a dream for main stage, have a very talented group of actors. So it will have, I think there's 8 actors and 1 musician. I've done the adaptation. This is a play I know backwards. I've directed it with students and various people, and I just know this play very well. I think The Dream is known very well by a lot of people, so it's kind of thought of, it can be mistakenly thought of as full of fairies and rather childish. I think it's actually just so deeply about our dream logic, which every 24 hours, every one of the 7 billion people on the planet has the weirdest dream life. We do. And we all wake up and go, oh my God, what was that? Our desires, our sexuality, our needs, our passions, our loves getting played out in our unconscious minds, our sleeping minds. It's so beautiful, and it does that. It picks up on that. But with this play, I've done much less what I would call adapting than I would do with any other Shakespeare play. There's something about the narrative of The Dream, I think he did it himself, that if you think you're cleverer than it and you think you can mess about with it, you just end up in a confusing mess. Or if you think you don't need a bit of it, you can do it without the mechanicals or etc. It just doesn't work. You need everybody. It's like nature. Like the oak tree needs the water and the sun and the leaf and the chemical reaction that makes everything happen. It's fascinating in that way. I also have a beautiful sense of this play. So Fairyland, the people who go really fast around the earth. Puck says, I'll put a girdle about the earth in 40 minutes. There's always been, at any time frame of human existence, people moving faster than anyone else. So at the moment, it's these insanely rich people going to the moon and Mars and, you know, the Elon Musks, the Richard Bransons, boom, boom, boom. They're flying around the earth and the universe, looking at the rest of us. And on the other end of the spectrum in Midsummer Night's Dream, you have a donkey. You have a creature that literally is stuck in the mud, doesn't move anywhere. So this idea that at any one time on planet Earth, there are some people moving incredibly fast and some people not moving at all. And then in the middle, there's the lovers who are neither very, very slow or very, very fast and just obsessed with their own love lives. Just absolutely, that's all they can think about is just my love, and kind of narcissistic, but very sweet at the same time. And the mechanicals have to use their hands. So there's a kind of class structure within Midsummer Night's Dream that's sort of embedded in it as well. All of that is very enjoyable to play with. As I said, my cast are very, very talented, very musical. I have an amazing kind of cast member for each part. And a bit like Shakespeare did, I've made the adaptation around the actors that I know and love and I have with me. So the guy who plays Oberon is this phenomenal dancer from India, beautiful actor as well, but he literally can hold at least 4 people on his body. He's done all this amazing dancing. So that's what he'll do. Not all the way through the play, but there'll be moments where he has everybody. And then we have a beautiful singer who will play Titania, and all that musicality is there. So I'm very lucky. I've built up a group of people who I love working with, and I make these adaptations with them in mind. Very like Shakespeare, it seems to be known, did with his company.
I'd also like to talk about another event that you're doing this year with the Flute Theatre. You're celebrating your 10th birthday.
Yeah.
And you'll be hosting the International Festival for Autistic Individuals, which is the first international theater festival of its kind. Can you share more about this event too?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I woke up about 6 months ago and went, I'm going to do this festival. And I said it out loud. And so now we're doing it. The best ideas are the bold ones. Mm-hmm. Basically, we've made so many, what I would call flute families, great friends with autistic people and their families around the world over these last 10 years as we've been traveling, namely in Peru, all these places where I've had long-term projects, Peru and Spain and Romania. And then more recently over the last 2 years with Ukrainian refugees who have autistic children. So we have a big project with them as well. So we're going to bring them to London. The Ukrainians, the Romanians, the Spanish and the Peruvians. My life at the moment is just looking at plane tickets and visas. We're bringing them to London to join our London community of autistic families. And together we will all make multilingual performances of these shows that we've all done in different languages, in Russian and Ukrainian, Spanish, Romanian. We've done them in these different places, and obviously English here. but they've never met each other. And whenever we as a company come back to London, we tell our London families, oh my God, it was so amazing in Romania, etc., etc. So as I said, I just thought I'm going to try and bring everybody together, break down these boundaries of exclusion even more, prove that people can travel, people can come together, they can meet each other, they don't have to be excluded in any way at all. And I have to say the response has been amazing. The families are so excited to meet each other. So the summer festival will take place at Riverside Studios in London in August for 4 weeks. We're all going to perform the shows together and hopefully be the first of many of these festivals where people who would otherwise be marginalised and locked away from this kind of experience have the chance to own it for themselves.
I'm very touched by this, and I'm so excited that you get to do this, and I cannot wait to hear how it turns out.
Thank you very much. Wish us luck. I mean, there's no end of goodwill. I'll say that. I mean, all the families here in London, you know, the parents are all, and everyone connected is just saying, what else can we do? Everyone's going to be at the airport or the train station to meet people. And yeah, you should come, young ladies, young women, young people.
I would love to. It sounds...
Yeah,
I would love to.
Or do your own one. Well, let's see how it goes. We'll keep in touch about it, obviously.
Yes, absolutely. It sounds like a wonderful adventure.
Yeah.
Kelly, this has been incredible to learn from you and hear from you. One, if anybody is near Romania in May or near London in August, we will put information about both of these events in our episode description. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your work with us. It has been fantastic to get to know you and hear more about the work that you are doing with Shakespeare for individuals on the spectrum.
Thank you so much for asking me, and good luck with everything to you.
Thank you for listening.
I'm Courtney Smith.
And I'm Elise Sharp.
This is Shakespeare, anyone?
Thank you so much for listening to Shakespeare Anyone. Works referenced in this episode are available in the episode description. Our theme music is Never Ending Minute by Sounds Like Sander. If you would like to support us, it would help us out if you would hit the subscribe button, like us, leave a comment, write a review, share us on social media, tell a friend about us, all the things. We'd appreciate it.
You can also support the podcast at patreon.com/ShakespeareAnyone.
Patreon patrons get access to exclusive bonus content throughout the year. The link is also in the episode description.
For more, you can visit our website, ShakespeareAnyone.com, follow us on Instagram at ShakespeareAnyonePod, or Twitter at ShakespeareAnyone. For Twitter, that's Shakespeare Any and the number 1. Every other platform is spelled out like the name of the podcast.
Now, because you listened all the way to the end of the credits, here's a completely random Shakespeare quote for you.
I have of late, but wherefore I know not, lost all my mirth, forgone all custom of exercises, and indeed it goes so heavily with my disposition that this goodly frame, the earth, seems to me a sterile promontory. This most excellent canopy, the air, look you, this brave o'erhanging firmament, this majestical roof fretted with golden fire, why it appears no other thing to me than a foul and pestilent congregation of vapours. What a piece of work is a man! How noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving how express and admirable, in action how like an angel, in apprehension how like a god, the beauty of the world, the paragon of animals, and yet, to me, what is this quintessence of dust?